It's recording now, I think. Yes, we're recording now.
All right, so we're going to talk about two frames today. We're going to talk about the political frame and the symbolic frame. I do want to do the political frame first.
That sounds good.
Should we read the prompt this week or just jump right in?
I think we could just jump. We're looking for strengths and weaknesses of the political frame.
That's correct.
Yeah. Political frame is probably my least favorite frame. I don't know about y'all. But I hate politics. They're useful sometimes, particularly the institution I'm going into, Georgia Southern, is a very political institution in how they organize their structure, how they do things. It's very narrow, very defined. You do not go outside your chain of command ever, unless you want dire consequences. So yeah, this one's definitely probably my least favorite.
I feel like at my current institution, because we're in a rural area, it's like political within. So it's like if you know a higher up, you're good with them. When those higher
Mhm.
positions come in, like, oh, this is gonna be posted, apply for it, I'm gonna recommend you. That's how kind it is. Don't get me wrong, people who have gotten those leadership positions, from what I've seen, like, yeah, I can see you getting that. I understand why you got it, but it definitely was a who you know, not how good you are kind of thing.
Mhm.
What
So.
I
The
liked about
reciprocation piece.
Yeah, what I liked about the political frame is that it's realistic. I mean, it acknowledges the fact of the matter, which is there's not enough for everybody and choices have to be made. And then it also acknowledges kind of what I like about middle management, which is I always called myself a brat, like I'm going to get my way. And it allows it accounts for the idea that people are going to be maneuvering to align their pieces to get what they want. And again, I think that's very realistic. And I also think that that's very effective, particularly if you think in terms of, I'm going to say yes to this. And that's because I'm going to take this the next time it presents itself to me. So those are two of the things that I enjoyed about the political frame.
Yeah, well, the part of the political frame is, especially with community colleges, if you have so many different avenues pulling and tugging with each other because you got students, you have the staff and the faculty, then you have the community because it's like you're dependent on all those, and they're all have buying for different interests,
Mhm.
and you have to figure out how you balance all those because you can't alienate any one segment of that because you fail. Because I see it on independent because I don't have to worry about the community. I have to worry about students, faculty, and staff. Community, we don't get tax dollars, so I don't have to deal with legislatures. I don't have to deal with the general community because they're not posting millages for us. But at the community college, you're everywhere. You're trying to please everyone, which in today's political climate, where everyone is more entrenched now, I think more than ever, it's a hard balancing. I those that can do it well, they have skill sets that many people don't have.
Mhm.
Uh,
I'll jump in and probably is going to toss a alley-oop to Toni, as she's going to talk about Cotter's, model. But I think where the realistic view really comes in, and that again is kind of jumping off what Alisha said, this realistic aspect of this model or this structure. When you think about DEI, so I'm gonna just pull it into to me. Leon, you already said I deal with a lot of political things, right? So when we had to build the business case for diversity years ago, and we know we're on the other side of that, still trying to keep a business case for diversity, you're always trying to find buy-in and build leadership buy-in and buy-in from a variety of people. And this framed emphasis on power dynamics and coalition building is what I kind of liked about it because I saw that happening, and this is way before I even understood what this meant. But really negotiating, what it means and creating that sense of urgency. And I think that's where when you look at Cotter's model is creating that sense of urgency. This really was a great example of that, and I think this is what helped me resonate with this with this particular structure.
I think one thing that's similar between like the Cotter's model and also politics, the politician model is where the frame, is that Cotter emphasizes communication is going to be needed if you want it to work. And how with politics is all about talking, building those relationships, making sure relationships, one, after you build them, you're sustaining them. So I feel like with the two frames, that's how they kind of coexist together and they coexist well together. If you can do both well, you may end up where things are working out in your favor. But also too, with like political frame, you realize that people are coming in and out. And kind of thing with Cotter is like sometimes you have to go back steps. All steps you go in order, but sometimes as you get to 4, you may have to go back to 3 because now something happened that you got to go back. So kind of what well, like the political frame is that something may happen, makes you have to backtrack and reevaluate your stakeholders you're communicating with.
I
Really
think it's
That's
quick,
a
I'll
good
jump
point,
in
Tony.
too, and if you don't mind, really quick, is speaking of weaknesses really quickly, because I know we're on time, it's time consuming, right? And again, I'm just
Mhm.
speaking from experience and trying to build a coalition and really get people's buy-in. That can be really time consuming when you look at this with this particular structure. Sorry, Erin, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking about the underlying thread of people, because the one that I'm most drawn to is the human resources, but the political has those elements of it, right? Those elements of the people and their relationships, because the political doesn't work without the people. And you can even look tie that into our second one that we were going to talk about, the symbolic frame, the same thing, right? It's all people driven. I think, in fact, almost all of the frames are people driven.
That's my one criticism of the frame in general is like separating these out, structure with human, those people are in those structures. And so if you move the structures, you hurt the humans, and then the humans don't have enough. And so then the political, so that's one criticism I just have in general of the frames is they're not really as separate as they're presented.
Yeah.
With the political frame, I do think the video that we watched with Simon Sinek, and his point of being like authentically honest about things and really coming from a point of view, I do think that's intention with the political because I may be being honest with what I need in resources, but I may also be leaving off how much I understand you need that resource because I
Yeah.
am self advocating to get it. And so I do think there's a little, intention with this. Like if you, really are trying to get to the best of your brand and you're trying to, do your best, you need to be authentically yourself. You need people to be it about the customer. And this is really about the internal workings of like the end goal may be the customer, but this is really about how the sausage is made, not the actual sausage.
But when you think about this horse trading that goes on in the political in there, do you think you get the better end result is when people have to basically trade and compromise and to get because eventually you have to get to an end result because otherwise you collapse. And does that allow that to have maybe a better decision? Maybe it's not what everyone wants. We never get everyone wants, but if you get a compromise, it's what's best for everybody, or
You get a
everyone
government
equally
shutdown.
hates it.
I think that really depends on your culture, Leon. I think that depends on the culture that you've built
Yeah,
at the institution.
that's right.
I've worked, one of the benefits of my career has been that I have worked a lot of different places. I've seen a lot of different cultures, from the really, truly, terribly toxic to the pretty awesome. I mean, so the answer to your question is it really does depend, which is why I think there's so many different frames because the frame that you use is really going to depend on the situation you're in. It's
Yeah.
going to depend on the institution. It's going to depend on the culture. Even myself, when I look at kind of working to implement change right now, because we're in such a state of change, I figure now is a great time to change all the things that nobody likes because we're already in a big upheaval. But even within our institution, as we're undergoing this big change, I'm always looking at different ways to approach different changes, right? It's not a one size fits all, which is why there are so many different frames and different videos on this topic, because there's not one size fits all approach that will work every single time, even within one institution.
So I think that kind of brings us to the symbolic frame where, it's such a good example or like thought of like, actually, a lot of this also takes place inside, kind of what organization. For me, the symbolic frame is most influential and kind of a cornerstone when you actually do have those symbols of culture. I went to Austin, Texas. Hook'em. I don't even care about anything having to do with Texas, but I remember Hook'em because that was talked about everywhere. The burnt yellow or burnt orange everywhere is one of the most impressive things. And so like there you can't escape the ritual and symbolism that, kind of centers this gigantic college in Texas. Whereas at community colleges, I think we have to work really hard to accept that that symbolism is important and meaningful when it's classroom, car, classroom. And so like I understand the power of it, but it seems much more aspirational at a lot of community college than it is embedded already in the culture. And that may be an opportunity for leaders.
Yeah.
You know
Do you
what?
know what my husband remembers most about the state of Michigan? We were there for what, a little over 15 months. Do you know, not just this, but that I swear to God, you could not go anywhere to any store without seeing somebody with a sweatshirt with the state of Michigan on it or a sweatshirt with the outline of the Great Lakes. Like you could not go anywhere without seeing a car with a Michigan sticker on it. I mean, every single where we went in Michigan, there at dead of winter, a guy with a Michigan sweatshirt, shorts. That is
I
the
feel like
entire state of Michigan.
with this
Shorts
with this
and a sweatshirt.
framework, you see how like representation matters. Like it's a big part of it. So as
Yeah.
long as you show that representation, it's gonna add to like wanting to know more.
Is there then this sense of, and from what I read, this sense of, and I think Alisha just mentioned it, the emotional connections and meaning, like to these
Yeah.
particular symbols, and you see the state of Michigan, you see the mitten, or you see the hook'em horns, and so I think that's the strength from what I read, right? Is that this symbolic piece and these things work really well when there's a lot of ambiguity going on. I mean, things can be totally at fray, but people do know what the block M mean, or they know what the hook'em horns mean, and that still kind of has some it has symbols of unity, if nothing else. So I think for me, I really connected with that strength of this particular structure.
Yeah,
So
and I feel like it also like it fosters like a belonging. So you have that shared aspect. You may have a difference, like how you mentioned, Aaron mentioned, like you'll see that Michigan sweater somewhere. You may have a difference in who you're gonna root for, but at the end of the day, you want those Michigan teams to be winning.
let's say we look at the colleges. I think community colleges have a little harder image with the symbolic because we're very
Yep.
transitory set of students. But I think internally, I think it helps us because almost every community college mission boils down to what's best for the students. And sometimes that what's best for the students can change a lot of the debate on campus because everyone wants more. And oh, I want to do this. And then you can always go back to what's best for the student, not what's best for faculty or what's best for administration. What do we achieve back to going back to the student? And sometimes, because what are you going to do? You can't say, oh, we can't do that because that's good for the students. No one's going to go out and say, screw the students. I want this, right? They're going to say, oh, crap. Yeah, I have to back off because we're going to do what's best for the students. And sometimes that could work even on an institution that doesn't have a strong identity by itself. But having community colleges says we don't care about students.
Well, and I think, Leon, that brings us to what is the weakness of this frame? Isn't all that history and all that tradition sometimes the weakness, right? If you are so tied to that history and tradition that you're not willing to adapt to the changing times, in my mind, that's where community colleges excel because we are more nimble than an institution
Great point.
with
Great
300
point.
years of history behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
Yeah,
because
some
we're
of those.
like those institutions sometimes can be those that are reluctant to have change happen. You have those people who have been there for 20, 30 years and they're like, oh no, that never happened when I was doing X, Y, and Z. It's like as times evolve, we have to make sure we're evolving too.
Yeah, well, community colleges are considered babies compared to a lot of four-year institutions. Most of us didn't come around to the 60s, and compared that to some 4 years have been around for hundreds of years already. And
Sure.
it's yeah,
Think of
they
your
have
Harvards and your
institutional
Yales.
history.
Hmm.
Think of your MITs and your Harvards and your
Yeah,
Yales, how much you
yeah.
want to bet there's folks there that are like, oh, no, 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 no. For the past 400 years, we've done it this way.
That's where communicating a vision becomes so important because you have institutions like that with long histories, and then you also have institutions with very short histories. And so bringing everybody in and communicating where we're going, I think really, helps people kind of get on board, particularly those who may have been excluded from those in the past. And so I think, kind of that noble goal, whether it be a noble lie or a noble like next year is super important. And the other thing about just symbolism and kind of thinking about it in a community college context, KVCC is Kalamazoo Valley Community College, and we tried to change to Kalamazoo Valley. And I tell you, every alumni person who graduated and gives money to that school calls it KVCC. And so also I think, you have to be able to
all the time.
embrace what you actually are to people, because that's what they're emotionally attached to. But if you do want to move it and you do want to move the narrative, you have to be sensitive to where that is. And then again, you have to kind of goad them and guide them there through vision and purpose. And maybe you'll lose, and maybe everyone will still call it KVCC, but you try.
And
That was
understand, I think that's the bigger piece is even in everything around change and transformational change, it takes time. Change takes time. The longer something has been in place, the longer it's going to take. They say that about relationships. What they say, the longer you've been in a relationship, it takes for every year you've been in a relationship, there's 6 months it takes to get out of or to get over a relationship. I know that was a sidebar, but whatever. But it is what it is.
I think one of the big weaknesses for symbolic is it gets you in that trap. That's the way we have always done it, and that's our heritage. That's our tradition. And I sometimes I wonder if it's how much of an excuse that is to say, "Oh, we can't try that because that's not." Pick on I hear this a lot. It's not the Manchester way. Well, the Manchester way is broken. That's why we need to change it. They don't use it as an excuse, but they're engaging it symbolically that say, "Hey, we can't adapt because it's not the Manchester way." And I think that's part of one of the weaknesses of symbolic. It could be a barrier to change because people are hanging on to traditions, even though those traditions don't work.
Well, and sometimes it's external, right? The story in the textbook was about New Coke, right? When Coca-Cola decided that they were basically facing stiff competition from Pepsi, and they decided to try New Coke because it tested better in taste tests than Pepsi, and everybody lost their minds. They're like, no. So sometimes it's external forces too that don't want you to change. But I think that brings us to the second half of our prompt. How do we choose what frames we use within our own institutions, and how do we use those to bring about change?
I think we have to look at what has been being done, and then look at also what needs to still be done, and see if there's a way you can kind of have intertwine of both of them to make the system work well. Because sometimes you do want to keep those like symbolic things, as mentioned, like those rituals that you may have. That could be symbolic to university or to the community college. But how can we evolve it to keep it, but still make it just as worthwhile as like happening?
I really do think that it's situational, right? And as we come up on time, I think we need to just be cognizant of time. I'm sure we're at 15 minutes as we speak. I can tell you that, I tried to spell this out, and we're looking at coalition building. So really quickly from a structural frame, one of the things, depending on what it is you're really trying to do, data is going to always be a thing. So from structural, maybe you present institutional data, and I'm really speeding through this. From a human resource standpoint, maybe you conduct listening sessions and with faculty and advisors and students and all the different stakeholders. And again, you got a political aspect, building a guiding coalition that includes, these stakeholders, recognize what resources are going to be there. And then from a symbolic standpoint, frame the initiative with the organization's missions and values. We just talk about that. What are the missions and values? And for example, when we were looking at strategic planning, right? All these things took place in the strategic planning process. So
I think you're right on it. I think there is now one. I think it's like always a constant blend. You put them all in the blender to get the result, because it's not one or the other. It truly is all, because as you work through the process, you have to deal with each subcomponent, because it is. You have to deal with the human. You have to deal with the politics, because everything is political.
Yep.
And then you have to deal with, hey, if we're going to change our mission or our focus, you have to address that too. And it is. I think you can't just do one. I don't think there's any issue where you can just do one, because it is all intertwined.
think the frames also give you an understanding where the pain point is. So, like, what may appear to be a structural pain point is actually people pain point, or it's actually a resource pain point. Maybe you have to restructure someone's position from this to this because you just don't have the money to support that program anymore, and so, but that's a human thing, but it's also a structural thing. And so I think that's where and then seeing this as a change framework, I think is really helpful to identify kind of the gears. But again, I think like what Toni said about Cotter actually, I think kind of gives you a mechanism by which to maneuver through the different frames. And I think, the frames are a good, assessment. They're a good way to find the pain points. And then I think taking another model, to kind of like, okay, this is how we're going to negotiate it, is, also prudent in a way to kind of get, as you said, kind of referring to the political kind of, the best thing possible at the end when everyone has the input and no one's happy.
It's interesting, Alicia, because I joke sometimes that my team, we're the island of misfit toys, because as we're merging with Georgia Southern, we're losing a lot of positions, but they don't want to lose the people, so we're trying to move people around. So there's only one registrar, right? So we can't keep our registrar, there's only one director, So basically they're moving folks around. And for a while there, my team was like oh, you can't figure out where to put this person. Put them on Erin's team. And I had to finally say to my boss, that's great. And I love taking on all these people, but we need to really think about what's a good fit. You can't just
Yeah.
take these people and be like, okay, well, you're not registrar anymore. So we're going to, move you to someplace else. That's fine, but we have to stop it and take a minute and look at where this person is a good fit. Because just moving the pieces around and restructuring, if you do that without thought, you're going to end up with the same issues that we've always had. People in positions that they're a poor fit for, people that are in
Yeah.
positions that they didn't want, or, are not in their area of interest. So yeah, there really is that looking at that. Well, here's the structural piece, but can we also look at the people piece?
And
You
the
know,
symbol piece. Why? Why are you doing
Yeah.
this with these people? What are
yes.
they supposed to be doing? Yep. Sorry,
Yes.
Trace.
No, I was going to say, as we talk about people, and probably to close us out, just something that I just wanted to add is, as we talk about people, there's a change curve, and I don't know who the person was, but it talks about
Yeah.
the human aspect of change, and it goes through these where change happens. One of the first thing is shock, and then denial, and then anger, and then fear bargaining, and then depression, and then exploration, and decision. Like, so we all go through these feelings when we get ready to go through change. And so when you look at it from a very humanistic standpoint, that's something that we really do want to take into consideration from a psychological level. So again, I think that for me, that was very much mind blowing, because we were dealing with people. And is it Simon? Was it Simon Sinek? Is that his name? Where he
Mhm.
really just talked about, hey, if you don't know people, then you don't know business. So
Yeah.
I think we did that.
We did.
Did.
Thanks, team, for logging on. I'm gonna stop it.